gender matters for effective adaptation to climate change? The impacts of climate change, including seasonal changes, sea level rise, and extreme weather events, are already affecting people's lives in both subtle and devastating ways. Adaptation to climate change is the process of building the resilience of communities, ecosystems, and economies to these impacts. It requires action at all levels, from individuals, governments, and the international community. For adaptation to be effective, it's important to recognize that the impacts of climate change affect different people in different ways. How they are affected depends on where they live and how they earn their livelihoods. In many contexts, it also depends on their gender. Women, men, and non-binary people often play different roles in their households and communities. They also have different access to resources and opportunities. These differences influence their vulnerability to climate risks, as well as their capacity to prepare for and manage the impacts. Women and non-binary people are often at a disadvantage as they face barriers in realizing their rights due to norms, traditions, and policies that perpetuate gender inequality. Other forms of discrimination, for example, based on race, being indigenous, or having a disability, also play a role in making some people more vulnerable than others to the same climate impacts. This means we can't look at gender in isolation. A gender-responsive approach is intersectional, recognizing that people have multiple identities that shape their experiences. A gender-responsive approach focuses on three things: who matters, who decides, and who benefits. The answer to the question of who matters is, of course, everyone. Everyone matters when it comes to managing the impacts of climate change. This means that investments in adaptation must be designed to meet different needs, taking into account people's gender and their social status. When it comes to who decides, we must consider who is typically excluded from planning and decision-making. A gender-responsive approach brings diverse voices to the table, recognizing the value of their knowledge and their potential as agents of change. Without careful attention to gender and social dynamics, there is a risk that adaptation investments actually reinforce existing inequalities in wealth and power structures, rather than benefiting the most vulnerable people. Adaptation is effective when it is equitable, providing opportunities and benefits for all people. Governments, private sector actors, civil society organizations, and communities around the world are ramping up efforts to respond to the impacts of climate change. We have an opportunity to ensure that these efforts also generate progress towards gender equality. To make this happen, we need a gender-responsive approach to adaptation. This is the only way we can build families, communities, and societies that are resilient to the impacts of climate change.